Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat.
Resolves.
Now, before you attack
Does
me,
anyone have an answer?
well played.
Good game.
Hello everyone, I'm Jumbo Commander and I have an important question for you today. Can you be bribed? Now this is actually a more interesting and intricate question in Commander. In a multiplayer format, can you be bought? Can you be bribed? Can you be manipulated and set against other players? Well, first let's launch in and try to find out, well, what is bribery? There are so many great cards in Commander which can give your opponents advantages. And there are the classic cards that advance everyone, the group hug cards. What about a collective voyage? Everyone gets mana. Attempt with discovery is a little bit more in-depth, but there's problems with these cards. When you give everyone a present, you're not bribing anyone. You're not turning one player against another. You're just giving everyone a toy. Tempt with Discovery is a great card. I love it and I have it in many decks. But you're not really able to target your bribe. You're just kind of throwing stuff out there and hoping someone takes it. Now, I'm not saying that these are bad cards or a bad strategy. In fact, you could be better equipped to use more lands than your opponent. You could run Tempt with Vengeance or Alliance at Arms and be better suited to use the tokens that you produce. But it's not really bribery. It's more like using Group Hug to your advantage. This can also be seen in other creatures like Gihiji Honored One, which gives a buff to all of your opponents. It is nice. They don't attack you, but you're not really bribing them, you're just incentivizing them to attack each other. Again, very political and I love it, but not really a bribe. I can also put Jasilla or Edric in the same category. They incentivize your opponents, but they're not really bribing them. So all of these bring up a very important point, and that is that Group Hug is not necessarily bribery. Having the power to give something away for free is very good. Feldegriff allowing opponents to gain life or put in tokens or draw cards is fine, and you can use this to help manipulate the table. But wouldn't it be better if you got a little bit more than just returning Feldegriff to your hand to have your opponent draw a card? Or gaining Trample to give them a 1/1? Maybe we could get a little bit more out of this deal. So the first thing we need to talk about is temptation. Because just giving someone a little bit of life doesn't necessarily earn their loyalty. But having the power to end a game or do a lot of damage, well, that might be a more powerful effect for your opponents. So I'd like to first introduce Kaseto Orochi Archmage and Rogue's Passage. Both of these can be used on your own creatures, making it a very powerful card to have in your deck, but it can also be used on your opponent's creatures. And this can give the temptation to them, like, just look, I'm gonna pump it, just go and get them out of the game. So what's the best way to use this ability? Well, I believe the safest would be to allow your opponent to attack a different player, and then before blocks, you activate this effect, making sure that their creature goes unblocked. But you're the last person to sort of manipulate this situation. It makes it look like you're the force behind this damage getting through. What could be interesting is making the deal with the opponent and say, I'm just going to activate this Rogue's Passage before attacks, and I'm going to trust that you don't attack me. Now that can create a very interesting political dynamic. The opponent could turn on you, even after you've given them something, or they can decide to swing their creature at someone else. In that scenario, even though you're the one that got the damage through, they are the person that made the last decision. And that goes a long way with convincing people who their true enemy is. Let's mess around with combat a little more with a card that I love called Duelist Heritage. 2 and a white for an enchantment that reads, whenever one or more creatures attack, you may have target attacking creature gain double strike until end of turn. This is not just your creatures, this is any creature, and it's a May ability, which is wonderful. So you have control over exactly what creature gets double strike and if a creature gets double strike. This is very cool because you can wheel and deal with this and give this very powerful buff to some opponents but not others. This also has me thinking of Kessig Wolf Run, which also ends games, and just like Rogue's Passage, it's very easy to include in a deck that can play red and green. And also a very simple enchantment, Evolutionary Escalation. At the beginning of your upkeep, put 3+1/+1 counters on target creature you control and 3+1/+1 counters on target creature an opponent controls. Wow, that is a huge buff turn after turn after turn. Lastly, in this sort of combat-focused category is Assault Suit. This equipment can equip to one of your creatures, and you have the choice to lend that creature to an opponent to get another attack in. People often use this with Zurgo Helm Smasher, but I'm excited to use it in Okamagachi Vengeful Kami. Sure, Zurgo Helm Smasher will definitely smash helms, but Okagachi Vengeful Kami will be an 8/8 flying, trampling monster that will probably be sent at the person who attacked them last, giving your opponents a very powerful ability to deal a ton of damage and exile target non-land permanent that player controls. Now, this gets at the heart of bribery. If I give my enemy resources, which will then be used against my other enemy, isn't that giving me an advantage? Yes. If I can successfully pit two opponents against each other, the likelihood of me winning the game of Commander goes up tremendously. There are often power shifts in a game of Commander, and someone will play powerful cards and be ahead in the game. And in these situations, it would be very powerful to have 2 or 3 players team up against another. If your deck is built to go 3 against 1 or 2 against 1, you have a huge advantage. Not only are you making an alliance with another player, but you're essentially doubling up your resources. Let me explain with a category called No Toys for You. Leading off, we have Hungry Lynx, a very simple 2-mana 2/2, but cats you control have protection from rats. And at the beginning of your end step, target opponent creates a 1/1 black rat creature token with Death Touch. And whenever a rat dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on each cat you control. Now, this card clearly belongs in a cat deck, but what it demonstrates is the ability to give an opponent something that really benefits you. Those rats are going to do nothing but clog up the board and cause trouble for your other opponents, while you get the amazing ability to pump your whole team. The Hunted series also does this very well, where you get a pretty powerful creature, but you're forced to give your opponent some good toys as well. Hunted Troll is an 8/4 regenerating for 4, but you have to give an opponent 4 1/1 blue fairy tokens with flying. But just imagine if we're in a game where it's 2 against 1. You've suddenly paid 4 mana for so many resources against that single opponent you're trying to team up against. All of the Hunted cards are great. I mentioned Hunted Troll, but also Hunted Dragon. There's one in every single color. The curses are also great for teaming up against a single player. Curse of Disturbance creates zombies. But I bet with this card you will create more zombies than your other opponents. Giving creatures away seems really bad, but if you have control over who you give the creatures to, then it can be a huge advantage. That's why I'm a big fan of the offering cycle. Infernal Offering, Sylvan Offering, and Benevolent Offering. All of these give you complete control over where these creatures go. And if you can manipulate the situation politically, you might have a tremendous advantage. Take Sylvan Offering, for example. If you and another player are teamed up, or if you find someone that can be easily bribed, then 6 mana pumped into Sylvan Offering can generate 20 power. Oh my gosh. That's 5 1/1 elves for you and your opponent, that's 10 power, plus a 5/5 for you, a 5/5 for another opponent, 20 power for just 6 mana. That is impressive, especially over so many bodies. That rate is insane. So Sylvan Offering is off the charts if you can manipulate the situation to your advantage. Now, I like the offerings a lot because you can choose the exact opponent that you're going to make this deal with. but sometimes it only matters that you choose who doesn't get the toys. A Crowan horse and Death by Dragons gives everyone else a huge advantage. This is kind of similar to the curses a little bit, where you can just choose the person that doesn't get it. Now, if you really want to exclude someone, not giving them a dragon or giving them a horse instead of soldiers is pretty good, but I prefer Fractured Identity, where you take their thing and give it to everyone else. Man, this is especially good because you can probably see the person in the lead. They could have any number of powerful non-land permanents that you remove from them and give to everyone else. That definitely evens out the playing field and puts that single player that was once very far ahead very much behind compared to the rest of the table. The next thing I want to talk about are choices. I always think it's great to be able to deny your opponents the proper choice, or you make them think like they have a choice. So I'd like to talk about one of my favorite cards, Skullwinder. Skullwinder is a card I've geeked out about before, but I want to just talk about it a little bit more. 2 and a green for a 1/3 Death Touch Snake, and when it enters the battlefield, you get a card from your graveyard back to your hand, and then you choose an opponent. They get to choose a card from their graveyard to return to their hand. Now, the reason why I think this card is so good is because it's often a 3-for-1 for you. I find that it's quite easy to make sure that the card your opponent gets back is not used against you. In fact, I often use Skullwinder as an ability to solve the problem of another opponent. I'll say, someone needs a board wipe. Who has a board wipe in their graveyard? Bam, Skullwinder, I'll choose you to get the board wipe. And so you've given your opponent a gift, but what you've actually done is you've let them use their resource to do something that you wanted to do anyways. Not to mention the card you get back and the 1/3 Death Touch relevant body, the Skullwinder is insane. A similar creature which is very political is Dawnbreak Reclaimer. 4 white for a 5/5 flying angel, and at the beginning of your end step, choose a creature in an opponent's graveyard, then that player chooses a creature card in your graveyard. You may return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control. Okay, so we can see that if you have 2 players working together, Dawnbreak Reclaimer is insane. But if someone's not working with you, this could be a huge liability. There's no may in this. It's not like you may choose an opponent. No, you are choosing creatures in opponents' graveyards. And if you are trying to team up against another player and then suddenly you have to start targeting their graveyard, or you don't have creatures in your graveyard, oh man, there's so many ways that Dawnbreak Reclaimer can go wrong. But you can't deny the power of turn after turn after turn resurrecting creatures to attack someone else. This is a great piece of bribery. I also have some other cards that are very similar to this: Null Mage Advocate, the Pulse Mage Advocate, and the Spurn Mage Advocate. All of these let you return cards from your opponent's graveyard to their hand, which is very powerful for minor effects. The Null Mage Advocate has you returning 2 cards to destroy an artifact or an enchantment. You could just return a couple lands, but I gotta say that's a pretty steep cost. It is really cool if you can give your opponents cards back that they'll use to sabotage other players at the table besides yourself. It's nice that you can target the spells. Skullwinder, you kind of have to trust them to get that board wipe to even out the table. With the Null Mage Advocate, you could just say, look, here's your board wipe, take it. It's certainly a card that you should be aware of, but I'm not convinced that the effect you get is worth 2 whole cards to your opponent. So I feel like bribery works best when you have more control in the situation. Skullwinder scares me a little bit because they can always say, yeah, I'm not going to pick that board wipe, I'm going to pick the card that's real good for me. I'm a fan of being able to choose myself, so a card like Tragic Arrogance or Cauldron of Souls makes me very excited. Tragic Arrogance lets me choose what artifact, creature, enchantment, and planeswalker you have left on the battlefield. And you know what? I'm fine. I'll leave you with a great creature if you plan on swinging it at this guy instead of me. Same thing with Cauldron of Souls. I will I will persist your creature as long as they're not pointed at me. And now you are the one providing the advantage, the gift to an opponent, and you're seeing none of the disadvantages. Unless, of course, they decide to betray you. Let's give our opponent some cards with Humble Defector, one of my favorite pieces of card draw in red. Also Diviner Spirit or Curse of Verbosity, Nin the Pain Artist. All of these are really interesting ways to let our opponents draw cards, and in some cases let us draw cards too. I particularly like Humble Defector because it's so hard to have just pure card draw in red. I feel like if you're in blue, you don't need to be messing around with Diviner Spirit or, Curse of Verbosity. I think you can find other great ways of drawing cards. Now, Fractured Identity is still my favorite removal spell in this video, but I gotta shout out Volcanic Offering. 4 and a red for an instant. I love that it's instant, if only Fractured Identity was instant. Anyways, destroy target non-basic land you don't control, and target non-basic land of an opponent's choice you don't control. You get to choose the opponent, and then they get to choose the non-basic land, so you guys could team up against a third opponent. Also, Volcanic Offering deals 7 damage to target creature, and 7 damage to target creature of an opponent's choice you don't control. Now, picking the player is going to be really important, because this can be truly minimized. If you pick a creature, the opponent can pick the same creature to do 7 damage to. If you pick a non-basic land, they can pick the same non-basic land. So if you're not working together with someone, this is a very poor removal spell. But if you're teaming up with an opponent to go after a third person, you get to destroy 2 lands, kill 2 creatures at instant speed for 5 mana. Speaking of mana, lending a little bit of it here and there can go a long way to making friends. That's why I occasionally run Spectral Searchlight instead of other mana rocks. This lets you give away mana to an opponent. I gotta tell you, the gift of a single mana, when it counts, might be more important than all of the cards and tokens that I've talked about throughout this whole video. And if you want to give everyone a little bit of mana, you can use Curse of Opulence, but again, there's not the choice. That's why I prefer Spectral Searchlight. You have the power to choose exactly when you're giving away your gifts. And one of the last cards I want to talk to you about today is reminiscent of Skullwinder, and that is a favorite of mine, Head Games. Head Games is a 5 mana sorcery. Let me read this majestic card. Target opponent puts the cards from his or her hand on top of his or her library. Search that player's library for that many cards. The player puts those cards into his or her hand, then shuffles his or her library. So you get to change out their hand with whatever you want. So this is very versatile because you can stack your friend's hands with all of the best cards to help you both win the game, or you can just demolish an opponent's hand. Oh, their hand is full of gas? Let's just change it all into lands. Or useless cards that they can't use. Head Games is spectacular. I've also been a little bit obsessed with Unstable, and so you could Head Games into all of their best stuff that they can't quite cast yet, and then play your Commander X, and then start casting all of their great stuff that's now stuck in their hand. Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, so here's the real question. Can you be bribed? And the answer should always be yes. Just imagine if you're the player that can't be bribed at the table. Well, then you're never getting my Humble Defector. I'm never giving you one of my offerings. In fact, you're the target for my Fractured Identity. See, if you're not open to bribery, then you're the one that they're going to team up against. So you need to be open to dealing with these cards. And if you are, then you can be the one running them and facilitating these political interactions. Because if you can properly politic your way in a game and utilize these cards that bribe really well, you're going to have a huge advantage in Commander. So I'll ask you again, can you be bribed? Of course you can, and that's why I'm giving away a Judge Promo bribery to one of my subscribers. How can you win this bribery? Well, all you gotta do is like this video, leave a comment below, and make sure that you're subscribed to my channel. I'm also going to give away a bribery to one of my patrons, so go ahead and check me out at Patreon. By the way, this bribery was donated to me by a patron named Gary. Hi Gary, thank you for the bribery. He gave me 2 of them to give away to help grow my channel. So if you want to be like Gary and donate some cards, or you just want to send me something, give me a shout out, then I have a mailing address now that you can reach me at. Otherwise, I'd like to thank all of my other patrons. Thank you, patrons! And so I really appreciate it because you are the ones that really make this channel awesome. So thank you, patrons, so much. And remember, you too can be bribed, Commander. So go ahead and like, subscribe, and comment to have a chance to win your very own copy of Bribery. Thank you very much for watching my video, and I'm really excited to chat with you in the comments. Talk to you later.